Have you ever noticed that modern knitting patterns usually start and end the same way? You're either starting with a folded hem or ribbing, and then you're going to end the same way. Vintage knitting patterns, they actually had a toolbox of techniques that not only finished your garment, but they would add really lovely details and they would add structure to your garment where it is needed. Today I want to share 5 of these tools with you. If we're having a look at these vintage knitting patterns, we can see color work edges, we can see more exotic things like fringes. We also see a lot of crochet finishes, and they can be simple or really intricate. And we also see cables to finish your garments. And I think all of these patterns are really beautiful. So we're going to have a closer look at them. So I want to start with the first technique, and that is the folded hem. That is something we're pretty used to with modern patterns, but usually you're just getting a folded hem. And what this does is it gives you a rectangular finish. And especially if we're thinking about vintage garments that have this tailored look and appearance, we want a cinched in waist. And ribbing has the effect of not only finishing your garments, but also shaping your garment. So if we're exchanging the ribbing for a folded hem, we need an additional technique to give you the shaping you need for the finish you desire in vintage garments. And there are different ways to achieve that. You can use side seam shaping, which quite a few modern patterns still use. But what side seam shaping does is increasing in a straight shape. And our body is not shaped straight. So what can happen, depending on the way your body's proportions work, you're getting a lot of volume at a place where you don't need it yet. So you're having a defined waist and you might have zero ease in the bust, but then you have this in-between space that has far more ease than below and above, and that just kind of doesn't look intentional. And it's not oversized, so it's giving you this weird appearance. So vintage patterns would use darts, additionally to using side seam shaping, because you would increase for a certain amount of time until you had your natural waist, and then you would gradually increase in the middle of your garment and not just at the side seams. So you have 4 spots actually on your body where you're increasing slowly, and that is making the garment look closer to your body. The same amount of ease between waist, the space between waist and bust, and your bust measurements. And I think this is a really beautiful finish if used correctly. Number 2, crochet finishes. This is also something you can see in a lot of modern patterns, especially the simple crochet finish. And this can be a really good technique if you have either a really basic garment and you don't want to add any attention to your finishes, or if you have a really intricate design and you don't want another design element that could distract people from the main element. This is one example. This is the Rococo Raglan by Sally Nodland. So it's a modern pattern, and we have these really intricate sleeves, and what we have around the hem is just a simple crochet edge because we don't need any attention there. And as we've just talked about folded hems without shaping, this garment doesn't have shaping. It has quite a boxy modern fit. And while I love this garment, I would have loved to know more about darts when I knitted this, because I would definitely incorporate shaping. But you don't only have basic crochet edges, you can also have really intricate finishes. This is a 1958 crochet blouse, so it kind of makes sense that it has a crochet finish, but you could use the same finish on your knitted garments, because usually in the past women would knit and crochet. And I've seen a recent video from Kutuva Kika where she also, I think it was Kutuva Kika, where she mentions that she hasn't really found a really nice knitting technique for a scalloped hem on your garment, and she's now using a crochet technique to finish the garment, and it looks just so beautiful. Number 3 is color work finishes, and I really love this. I haven't really seen that much in modern patterns, but I've been recently looking through this vintage knitting magazine, and there's a video where I go more into details about the patterns. But this garment uses a color work technique to finish the blouse and the cardigan. And I think that is so stunning. So it's not just finishing your garment, but it's the detail of the blouse. And in this case, we're having a floofy Angora yarn for the body, and then we're using simple wool in 2 colors to finish the neck. So you're having the contrast with the change of yarn and the color work. And you're knitting color work on one of the panels, and then you're folding it over, and you're just having one color stockinette on the folded hem of the garment. So knitting this on smaller needles than the body. So you're having the structured folded collar piece and the collar work in there. So you're cinching in the neckline a little bit because you're using smaller needles, and you're using color work as the eye catcher of the garment. So you're not just finishing it, but you're actually creating the design element of the garment around your finishing technique. And I think that is so beautiful. And if you don't want to go all out with the color work collar, you could also use just color work stockinette on the folded hem. And that is what you can see on the sleeve edges of this garment. You're basically knitting a folded hem with the normal yarn, just as you use for the collar piece. But 4 rows before you finish, you start knitting in a contrast color, and then you fold that over, and it just gives you this little beautiful edge. And it's really tiny detail, but it's just taking the garment to another level. So we've now seen techniques that can either be toned down with a basic crochet edge, just the folded hem, or a little color work detail, or be made into the statement of the garment with an intricate crochet edge, with a color work collar, or a folded hem with really intense shaping. The next technique, I don't really know how you would tone that down. That kind of is in your face all the way, and that is fringes. There was a time apparently in the 1950s, because I've seen a lot of especially American patterns that use this technique, that would use these fringes. And this blouse, I mean, the blouse itself or the sweater is really basic and quite tailored, and then it has this fringe in a contrast color, and I think this is so beautiful, and this definitely will end in my knitting queue for autumn. So you're just casting off the stitches on the sleeves. There's not really anything happening in terms of finishing because you have the fringe on top. You're crocheting a chain, and then you're knotting strips of yarn in there, and you tie a knot, and you do that for every chain, and that will give you the fringe. And depending on how many strands of yarn you use for each chain, you're getting more or less volume. And you could, I guess, tone it down by using it in the same color, but I still think it's a really out there technique. But it's just so beautiful. And last but not least, cables. This is also something I've seen in a few modern knitting patterns, but this sweater, I've seen it once and it's just stuck in my brain because it looks so stunning. I'm not the biggest fan of the overall shaping and the length, but that is something that is really easy to omit. But the cable details around the collar and the sleeve edges, that is just so magnificent. You're knitting this cable piece and you're folding this over, so you're getting more volume, and it's just more of a statement piece. And this is something that is definitely ending up in my queue, and I think I'm going to cast this on next because I think this is just so beautiful. And you could, knit this in a really basic color so that it's not so much in your face as a fringe would be. Or you could go all out with a statement color for the sweater and the cable collar finishes. Or you could even do that with a contrast color. And I always think a black sweater with some white in there in the cable details would really look nice. And I think I'm going to knit mine in burnt orange from Knitting for Olive. So these were 5 vintage techniques. There are so many more out there, different versions of these basic techniques. Do you prefer any of these techniques? Is there one in there that you haven't seen and where you're like, I really want to try this? I would love to know. So let me know in the comments down below. I will definitely try the fringe one and the cable one. And I will keep you posted in the knit and chat format of this channel if you want to know more about it. And now happy knitting, everyone. Bye!